Well, welcome to another episode of I Don't Want a Divorce, the podcast. What we do with God's power and the right strategies is save your marriage. And if you get divorced, help you fully recover and build a new life. For years, I was concerned about people that had gotten divorced, especially when it's an unwanted divorce. And so that's what my brand new book is about. If we can't save the marriage and end it in divorce, well, then you've got to recover and move on. Not easy to do. That's why I wrote the book. My brand new book, I Didn't Want a Divorce, Now What? So you can go to my website, davideclarke.phd.com, Clarke with an E, for all of my resources. This brand new book, all the other books I've written, and they're specific to each marital crisis. Of course, this podcast, my YouTube channel, my focus on the family interviews, they've been very good to me. Jim Daly, John Fuller, the whole team. My phone advice sessions are also there. I'm doing those now more than I'm doing in-person sessions. I still do marriage intensives and I still see local clients, but doing a lot of phone work, 1 or 2 sessions, get you on the right track, help you to save your marriage or begin to recover from divorce. And so this current podcast series is based on that brand new book, I Didn't Want a Divorce, Now What? And until March 16, we have a special pre-release price, $5 off. It's going to be a $20 book and it's worth that. But for you, until March 16, $5 off. Go to the website and order it. My beautiful blonde Sandy, who takes the orders and goes to the post office, is going to be handling those orders and sending them out probably right around March 16. But the pre-sale will last until March 16. Now, before today's topic, I'll read a question from a podcast subscriber. She says, Dave, I'm stuck in my divorce recovery. This is a very common situation. My sinful ex, who divorced me for no good reason, I've heard that a million times, seems to be doing fine. That's galling, isn't it? He seems to be fine. I'm a wreck, she says. He is flaunting his whore, and she calls her a whore, and I agree. This was the woman he had been with. There's more to the story I'm not reading, but he had an affair with this woman, and now he's married her. Actually, not married her yet, but they're together, living together. He's flaunting his whore all over town. My kids are forced to be around this worthless woman. Oh, that's tough. Money is very tight. I've lost a lot of friends and I'm really struggling. I'm suffering the consequences of his sin. Boy, she is. What do I do? Well, my answer is this, and this is not just for this lady, but all of you who may be in a similar situation, especially after a divorce that you didn't want. You are the person I wrote my divorce recovery book for. You didn't want it, but now you have to recover somehow. In this podcast, I'm going to give you some hope and show you how my divorce recovery process can change your life for the better. Now, here's the message for today. God is still in the divorce recovery business. He does not write you off, no matter what the reason for your divorce, and particularly if you didn't want it. He's going to be with you as you recover. He loves you. If you sinned in your marriage, sinned in the divorce process, he forgives you for that, and he will bless you. Now, for well over 30 years now, 35 years, I've been working with clients whose lives have been ripped apart by divorce. I can tell you hundreds of stories of ex-spouses who, with God's help and the right steps, recovered from the trauma of divorce. And it takes time. It takes a number of months to do it right. And if you don't do it right, you still have problems. Now, I hate to repeat myself, but I'm going to tell you again, every divorce is traumatic. Let's just be honest here. There are no exceptions. You also need to know that every divorced person can have God's presence and power in the recovery process. We saw that in the last podcast where with your theme verse and your theme story, that just reinforces God is with you in the process. But to give you hope and encouragement and reinforce your confidence in God's role in your recovery, and it'll be a big role, I present 2 stories of divorced clients in this podcast. And as you will see, these stories are illustrations of the 2 scenarios I mentioned in an earlier podcast. Number 1, your spouse divorced you for non-biblical reasons. He wanted out and he used the usual stupid excuses. I don't love you anymore. We've grown apart. It's better for the kids. I want to be happy. On and on. Idiotic, sinful, stupid. But that's what he told you. And he dumped you. The second scenario is that you divorced your spouse for biblical reasons. You didn't want to, but you did. Adultery, biblical reason. Desertion by an unbeliever, biblical reason. Or chronic emotional and or physical abuse by your spouse, also a biblical reason. Okay, here's story number one. I'm going to give you hope, and these are true stories. Story number one, he divorced me for another woman. My client sat on my blue couch, and you can see the blue couch right there. There was actually a blue couch. Anyway, my client sat on my blue couch and told me the sad story of her marriage and divorce. It was a good thing I had a full box of tissues because she cried her way through it. People always say, oh, I don't want to cry. I said, everybody cries in here. It's okay. After 15 years of marriage, her husband dropped a bomb on her one night. She told me she knew their marriage wasn't great, but she was completely shocked by what came out of his mouth. He said, I never loved you. Lie. We're just too different. Really? Everybody's different. I only stayed this long for the kids. Oh, really? I'm done and I want a divorce. He's just dropping the bomb. Of course, he failed to mention the zero-quality, morally bankrupt woman he had been committing adultery with for the past 5 months. Funny how they never mentioned the skank when they dropped the bomb on you. She found out about the adultery a few months after his I want a divorce speech. She told me she was stunned, shattered, devastated. The feeling of complete rejection was intense. Her self-esteem was shredded, her confidence gone, her identity stolen away from her. He changed her life in an instant. If you want to come to your spouse and say, you know what, honey, I'm very unhappy. It's been that way for a while. Should have mentioned it before. No excuse. Let's go to a marriage counselor. I want to save this. I want to love you again. I want to work things out. Hey, that's fine. These losers don't do that. They drop the bomb and it's over and there's nothing you can do. Now, to make matters worse, and this is a very common scenario, she got lousy counsel from her pastor and a Christian counselor. Way too common. They told her that her marriage problems were partly her fault. They urged her to chase her husband by losing weight, cooking better meals, and initiating sex. His sinful decision to end the marriage should have been the only issue. You come into my office spouting stupid stuff like that, you're going to be the only issue. It's not going to be balanced. It's going to be unbalanced. What's the matter with you? That doesn't happen with many pastors, unfortunately, or other Christian counselors. This pathetic and unbiblical approach didn't work. It never worked. It's never worked. It added to her humiliation and pain, and he still divorced her. What you do in that scenario is you turn things on the spouse. You change the rules of the game. That's why I wrote my book, My Spouse Wants Out. What I did was get her in touch with her righteous anger, at her stupid, sinful ex, at her clueless pastor and counselor, at ignorant friends who blamed her and abandoned her because her ex was lying to everybody about her and some were dumb enough to believe him. It's amazing how the rats leave the sinking ship. She was also angry at God for allowing this nightmare to happen. That's fair. That's normal. I encouraged her to be honest with God, to vent her feelings fully and often with him. She worked things out with God and built an even closer relationship with him in the divorce recovery process. More on wrestling with God in a podcast to come. You have to do it. It's universally important. She reclaimed her self-esteem, this lady, her confidence, and created a new identity. She helped her children heal, got a job, and found a new church. She started a new life, and it was a very good life. See, that's what can happen through the divorce recovery process when it's done right. Okay, here's story number 2. I divorced my abuser. My client had been divorced for a few months. She described for me in detail, which is what I asked her to do, her 20-year marriage to a narcissistic, emotionally abusive man. It's normally years of putting up with this before you pull the trigger and get out. This man was incredibly selfish, controlling, critical, zero empathy, zero compassion. That's one of the hallmarks of narcissism, no compassion or empathy. His needs were all that mattered. If something she did or said displeased him, he'd fly into a rage or ignore her for days. Everything was fine as long as she agreed with everything he said or did. Well, you can't do that in a normal relationship. Everything was her fault. Another hallmark of the narcissist, everything is your fault. She was never good enough. Her physical health and emotional health were steadily deteriorating. She was falling apart. She saw her children losing respect for her and beginning to abuse her. Listen to me, if you stay with an abuser, your boys will be just like him, if you have boys, and your girls will marry someone just like him. That's why you got to get out. Get the heck out. God guided this lady to my book, Enough is Enough, How to Leave an Abusive Relationship. She read it, she followed my plan of escape, and she left her husband, and she filed for divorce. Now again, I don't recommend divorce, but in this case, she had biblical reason, and God released her. That was exactly what she needed to do to save herself and her kids. Her dirtball ex continued to abuse her. Just more confirmation that she did the right thing divorcing him. She didn't need it, but he continued to abuse her. He wanted to make her suffer for divorcing him. He mounted a very effective character assassination campaign built on lies. Classic narcissist. He called her crazy. Lie. He was the crazy one. He called her emotionally unstable. Another lie. That was him. See, it's always opposite world with these dirtballs. He called her a narcissist. Lie. That was him. Look in the mirror, loser. He said she had abused him. Lie. Just the opposite. He said he had changed as a husband. Oh, I'd made some mistakes, but I've changed. Another lie. His central attack, though, and he was getting mileage with this in her life, was that she did not have a biblical reason to file and divorce him. He got their pastor, he got their children, and some friends to agree with him. All of a sudden, he was a biblical scholar. Are you kidding me? He never followed the Bible. He could care less. Now, all of a sudden, he thinks it's on his side. My client was struggling with her decision to file. She had not wanted a divorce. She waited years to divorce him. She had tried everything over 20 years to change him and the marriage. She had a ton of guilt for the divorce. You know, nothing works with a narcissistic dirtball like this. In fact, the more you try, the worse it gets. Her guilt was weakening her relationship with God. She believed she had displeased God by filing divorce. She believed God had moved away from her and was punishing her for the divorce. I've seen hundreds of clients just like this lady, and some men too. Now, she did the work of recovery with me and realized God was fine with her decision to divorce. She realized her guilt was false guilt. I explained the biblical support for divorce and a chronically abusive spouse. More on this in a podcast to come. And I've got a video. Check out my YouTube channel. There's a video also on chronic abuse, chronic emotional abuse being a biblical reason for divorce. So with God's help, here's the good news. With God's help, she healed from the deep wounds her ex had caused her. These guys do damage. She forgave him. She learned how to manage his narcissistic stupidity, which didn't stop, and stop him from making her miserable. She figured out why she had tolerated his abuse for so long. She did good work to repair her relationship with their children. She built a new, happy life, which is just what God wanted for her. As I hope you can see, God plus the right action steps equals full recovery from divorce. As you begin the hard work of recovery from your divorce, it is vital that you have God on your team. Not just important, vital. Let me show you how to get God on your team. That's in my next podcast, having God right with you. Now, remember, if you will, to leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to my podcast and show these podcasts, actually share these podcasts on social media. This will help people and help us grow our audience to save more marriages and help those who are divorced recover in the right way. So until next time,